Hello again to all our viewers. Just to let you all know that we shall be starting this webinar in approximately 4 to 5 minutes. Thank you so much for waiting.
Hi, Stacy. This is Alex. I've joined.
Thanks, Alex. We shall be starting in precisely 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. Really appreciate your patience. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is regarding working in Canada. Today, our consultants will be talking about various work permits and everything that is involved while working in Canada. This is a reminder to please stay till the end of the webinar, as we will be hosting a live Q&A session where our consultants will be answering your questions. So please stay tuned. Now, before we start the webinar, allow me to introduce you to the co-founders and licensed consultants of North Vista Immigration Consultants, Inc., Mr. Alex Romano and Mr. Nabeel Khan.
Hello, Stacy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Nabeel?
Very well. Thank you. Thank you. Alex is also here. Alex, your video needs to be turned on, please.
I was just told to turn it off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on work permits. So I will leave the floor to Stacy to introduce us, and we'll proceed.
Thank you so much, Alex. As most of you all know, you'll have spoken to our consultants. Both of our consultants have a combined experience of 30 years, and we take all sorts of cases. So stay tuned, and we shall be answering your questions at the end. So let's start off this webinar by asking Alex first of all. Alex, what are your views on the new policies that just came into effect a few days ago in Canada?
Well, obviously, the government is taking the necessary actions to help promote people who are in Canada to get through the immigration process much easier. So they've loosened up a lot of the restrictions that were formally introduced a few years back and realized that this is one of the only ways to take advantage of people who are in Canada who have invested in education and are currently working. And these people, if we were to lose these people, we would have to start an entire process all over again. So obviously they are the first in line to hopefully be awarded permanent residency. But we will have more to talk about these new programs in an up and coming webinar right around May 6th when the programs are better defined. We do have guidelines, but we'll be able to talk more intelligently about these programs come May 6th. So stay tuned and we'll help that you can join us in future webinars.
Alex, are you promising that there will be a webinar regarding these policies?
There will be a webinar and we will talk briefly about the benefits of some of these programs, how people can qualify for these programs. But one word of suggestion and one recommendation, if you have not taken an English proficiency test, please do so. It is a requirement in this program to have those documents ready to be submitted. Otherwise, you will not be eligible to enter your name in the program to be considered for permanent residency. So stay tuned for more information in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for letting our viewers know about the policy as well as about the webinar, and that we will be sharing more information in the coming weeks. So Nabeel are from outside the country. Do you think that they can come to Canada to work? If they can, how do you think the process is? Could you explain to our viewers how they would be able to work in Canada?
So Stacey, is that question for me?
Yes, Nabeel.
Yes. So again, there are different ways that we can work this out. So as you know, there are in short, there are two main streams of work permit: the open work permit and the closed work permit. Right. Open work permit is there are different streams again for open work permit, which the most famous one is the postgraduate work permit, and which is given to international students, which we will discuss, I believe, in this webinar in detail, right?
Yes.
Yes. So this is how the main thing is: the open work permit and the closed work permit. These are the two main streams, and further, each of these has different substreams, which we will discuss all in detail in this webinar then.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Alex, now since Nabeel spoke about outsiders coming into Canada and working, of course, a lot of them do want to bring their family along. So do you think that they would be allowed to bring, say, their spouse or a common law partner along with them to Canada?
It's a very good question. Just want to back up a little bit to further explain if you are a foreigner living in a country outside of Canada, one of the ways that you can gain access to a work permit is to have it sponsored by a job offer. A job offer would entail getting support from an employer who can justify the need for your skill set in Canada. Now, to extend that, if you get to that point where you actually, the employer has applied on your behalf to engage you in Canada on a certain skill, the next step is that if you have a family and you have children, then your spouse would be entitled to an open work permit with your children being able to attend school while they are in Canada with you. So that's one of the benefits of gaining access to a work permit as a principal applicant.
Perfect. Thank you for explaining that, Alex. Now, Nabeel, both of you all mentioned about open work permits and closed work permits. Could you get into the details? So, how would a candidate obtain an open work permit? And if the situation does arise, how would they obtain a closed work permit? What is the difference between both of these?
Okay, so let's start with the open work permit first. The open work permit is the most famous of them is the postgraduate work permit, which is given to international students who successfully complete their courses or education, post-secondary education in Canada. So let's say a 1-year course in Canada could lead to a 1-year work permit, a 1-year postgraduate work permit, and a 2-year course could lead to a 3-year work permit, postgraduate work permit. So the maximum validity of a postgraduate work permit is a 3-year validity of a postgraduate work permit, where a student can only get 3-year maximum work permit. And above all, these days, I would just like to add, as per the new public policy, which was announced on 27 January, those students between certain dates, they can apply for a postgraduate work permit extension for 18 months. So this is a special public policy that has been in place. So these are the open work permits that usually the most common ones. About the closed work permits, as Alex said, somebody with a job offer. A job offer is substantiated by something known as a LMIA, Labor Market Impact Assessment, which an Canadian employer obtains from Service Canada for a foreign national, which we call it temporary foreign worker. And once the LMI is approved and a work permit is applied, and the work permit issued to that temporary foreign worker is known as a closed work permit because it is employer driven. And that means it is employer specific. So closed work permit means that you can only work for that specific employer. So it is not that you can, and whereas on the contrary, open work permit, you can work on with any employer, not a problem.
Okay, perfect. I did understand that. Now, Alex, as Nabeel also mentioned, a postgraduate work permit. So, is this something that you only get after graduating, or do students who are still studying, do they get to apply for this?
No, you do have to complete your educational requirements, whether it is a 2-year postgraduate, whether it's a 4-year university education. Once you have completed those studies, then you would be entitled to a postgraduate work permit, provided that you have attended school on a full-time basis. We have had situations where students have taken time off from their studies and have returned to their studies after several semesters. This obviously disqualifies you from gaining a postgraduate work permit because you have not attended school on a full-time basis. Now, to add to that open work permit, this is to the open work permit concept, is that you can get an open work permit if there is a bilateral agreement between Canada and other nations where they allow a cultural exchange and work experience. But again, the requirements for candidates to apply is that you have to be under the age of 30 and show that you have you would benefit from the education or the work experience in Canada from your country of origin. So that is one way to get an open work permit as a mobility part of the countries or the government's mobility program with these bilateral countries. I hope that answered your question, Stacy. Was there a leading question to that?
Yes, actually, I did want to ask you about students. So, a lot of students ask us if they are allowed to work in the country while they are studying. So, do they need a permit for this?
Absolutely. When they get a student permit, they
Okay.
are automatically considered to have the ability and the right to work a minimum of 20, or actually a maximum of 20 hours a week during school period. Once they are out of the school period, say summer vacations, and if they finish school in May and redeem their studies in September, during the summer vacations, they are allowed to work full-time hours, which is roughly around 40 hours a week. So that would not penalize a student to be able to earn extra money to pay their living expenses while they're in Canada. It's an advantage of being a student that you can actually work while you're studying, but you can't make the work your priority. Study has to be your priority.
Perfect. That actually clears a lot out. Now, Nabeel, coming back to the postgraduate work permit, does this lead to being eligible for a permanent residence? Does it have anything to do with permanent residence? Is it required? Or how does it help?
Yes, a postgraduate work permit is the second step towards obtaining your permanent residence in Canada. So if you have taken the first step of coming to Canada as for a post secondary education, let's say you have a bachelor degree from back home, you do a 2-year program over here, and this 2-year program, after this 2-year program, you get a 3-year work permit, which is this postgraduate work permit. And if you work, there are certain categories which is known as NOC 0 A or B, National Occupation Classification 0 A or B. Under that NOC, and so that means that if your job title is under 0 A or B, and you worked 1 year full time, and the full time in Canada is considered as 1560 hours, which means at least 30 hours a week. So you can qualify for PR, provided that you have education equivalency for the degree that you have achieved from back home, and you have an English or French language score. So for English and French language, the two most famous tests are the IELTS General, the IELTS, which we call it IELTS, and CELPIP, the Canadian language test, which is become very famous right now. So you have to have these qualifications to proceed towards your PR. And this is known as those people who have studied in Canada and worked in Canada after their graduation. They are known as Canadian Experience Class, and they need minimum 1 year of experience to qualify under this Canadian Experience Class.
Perfect. That's actually very good to know. But do you think there are people who wouldn't qualify for immigration even after obtaining a PGWP? Say in the new policy, if we are talking about, are there some eligibility criterias?
Yes, under again, this new policy is, remember one thing, is most likely is a one-off thing that the government is launching just to take care of you because of this pandemic, to take care of international students. Under this new public policy that was launched a few days ago, there is a separate stream for international students with recent education credentials where they do not need this NOC 0 A or B work experience if they are recent graduate. So there are certain categories under this public policy of 90,000 where they have certain streams of certain NOC codes. If they work, they can qualify under that. Otherwise, they have the 40,000 limit where international recent graduates can apply in this one.
Okay, that's actually very good to know. Alex, coming back to open work permits where we were talking earlier, now how about individuals who are married to a PR or citizen? Can these individuals obtain an open work permit if they file for a spousal application?
Yes, they can, but there again, uh, both the spouse and the sponsor must be in Canada in order to qualify, and they must be submitting a spousal application to help the applicant who has no status as a permanent resident in Canada. So the way this is processed is that the work permit, the open work permit, is submitted at the same time as a spousal application. And there are two ways to do it, either submitting it with the spousal application or waiting until the spousal application is given to you as a file number and then submitting it online on a portal, either through a representative or even on your own. So this would allow you to gain access to an open work permit. Historically, I have to say that the government is, it would take, once an application is filed for spousal sponsorship, it could take 3 to 4 months to get an open work permit. So this is the challenge that we have today. With the amount of effort and the amount of budget, with our new budget, the government has committed to investing more money in developing the technology to help improve the whole processing of applications, because this will facilitate new immigrants to come in and get processed much quicker. So we're hopeful that the money that will be spent in the future to increase the technology that we need to process applicants will help accelerate this processing of open work permits, spousal application, and all other applicants related to immigration.
True, we do hope so. Now, since you spoke about the open work permit that a non-PR or the spouse gets, would you know the duration of the work permit that they would get? Is it just 1 year, is it 2 years or 3 years, or does it depend on case to case?
Well, it really depends. Usually, I've seen these work permits be given up to a maximum of about 2 years, because the spousal application normally takes 1 year to complete. So we've had customers, our clients, that have applied for the spousal back in March of last year, and midway during the year, they've received their work permits. And through the work permits, there's always the biometrics, there's always the medical examinations that they go through. And this is what shows us that their applications are actually in process. And it takes usually around 1 year for them to get a confirmation of permanent residency. So the immigration system is constantly changing, but they're changing their methods because of the pandemic that we're experiencing. So we're hoping that once we get over this hurdle with the pandemic, that things will be more streamlined.
Very true, very true, Alex. Thank you for clearing that up, because this is another commonly asked question about the duration of the work permit. So thank you for explaining that so well. Now, another commonly asked question, Nabeel, is about LMIs. And you had mentioned about LMIs earlier. Could you tell us a little bit about them in detail? What do they stand for, and what are the conditions to receive an LMIA?
Okay, yes, Stacey, that's a very good question and a very important topic to be discussed, because LMIAs are an integral part of Canada's system, work permits just for the systems. So how it works, the LMIA is a kind of, it's for an employer to sponsor a temporary foreign worker, as I said earlier a little bit short while ago. So any employer who is unable to find a talent or a skill set that is uncommon in Canada, and they are unable to find it. They have done the recruitment efforts. They have advertised for a minimum of 30 days, and they are still unable to find the required skill set. Then what happens is they have the right to go to Service Canada and apply for an LMIA, which is known as Labor Market Impact Assessment. And what is Service Canada then works on, has different sets of their set of criteria where they have to they analyze the employer, the job position, and the temporary foreign worker before issuing something known as a positive LMIA. So once a positive LMIA is issued, that positive LMIA is then attached to a work permit application for the temporary foreign worker, and the work permit application is applied to IRCC. So this is how it works out, the whole LMIA and the work permit process. But this leads to, I would remind again, this leads to a closed work permit. This means that temporary foreign worker can only work with that employer mentioned on his work permit.
Okay, and now since we have a lot of US citizens trying to come to Canada to work, what about LMIAs and US citizens? Are they eligible for an LMIA, and can they actually come to Canada through that? Is it open to everybody worldwide?
Yes, LMIAs are open to anybody. As again, LMIA is for a temporary foreign worker from anywhere in the world. It could be, but for US citizen, there's something additional known as, again, I repeat, it is for US citizens, not for green card holders or not for permanent residents or temporary workers in US. Only for US citizens, there's another stream known as CUSMA. So that is known as Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, which is the new name for the formerly agreement known as NAFTA. Under NAFTA trade agreement, what happens is that US citizens can apply to come to work in Canada, but there are certain categories allowed. There are only 60 different categories or professional streams, you can say, and there are certain education requirements. So, which if I'm not wrong, each category has a minimum education requirement of a 4-year bachelor degree. And that has to be justified. I mean, and the job has to be justified by the employer here in Canada. So for US citizens, it is relatively, they have a different pathway around. And LMI is also possible, but a pathway through CUSMA is also possible.
Perfect. That's actually very good to know, because people get confused whether there is only one way to come to Canada from the US. Thank you so much for that, Nabeel. Now, since you mentioned CUSMA, Alex, I think there is another term called ICT. Would you be able to explain what it actually means and who is eligible for this? Is it everyone worldwide? Is it only for US citizens?
It's actually ICT stands for intercompany transfer. So in order, the scenario would have to be that a company abroad outside of Canada has a physical presence in Canada, and they have a corporation with employees. Sometimes the talent of doing an intercompany transfer is necessary because they're really transferring employees who have the know-how of how that company works, their customer base, and so on and so forth. So it's much easier to transfer an employee from a different country into Canada for a period of 1 or 2 year contract through the intercompany transfer process. And this would also be considered a closed work permit because it is very much an employer-driven application. It does not necessarily fall under the realms of the LMIA, but it does have to be justified as a position that would be uneconomical for the company in Canada to hire a new employee, train that employee, and then spend that money in trying to employ that employee. These are positions that are usually taken from other branches and dropped in so that they can hit the ground running. Now, some of these positions end up the actual employee ends up going back to their country, or sometimes they have an opportunity because of their Canadian experience to actually apply for permanent residence.
And do you think through this pathway, I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
Do you think through this, oh,
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I was very curious because as we spoke earlier about bringing your spouses and common law partners, do you think through ICT the same can be done, or it is just for the employee?
Absolutely. Every family member that can be brought in through the ICT would be eligible for an open work permit. So you as the ICT employee would be on a closed work permit, but your spouse would actually be given an open work permit. And also, to go back to some of Nabeel's comments regarding the opportunity of filing an application for U.S. citizens when you can't find those applicants in Canada and there is an American citizen, there are certain requirements. An LMIA process, Service Canada, what they do is they look at our current labor market analysis. If a job is under a short supply of employees, and I give an example here, we have a very large expansion in the industry of welding. So welders are in great demand in Canada. And what employers are faced with is the challenge that they either have to steal these welders from different competitors and offer more wages, or they have to get students who are finishing a welding course and have to be trained, so that you spend a lot of money on training in order for them to come up to speed. So the analysis that Service Canada does is they look at job categories and they see if there's a huge demand for that job category, which makes it easier for Service Canada to approve LMIAs for these jobs that are very much in demand. So an LMIA would easily go through the process once the employer can justify that, look, an example is construction. Our construction industry in Canada is booming, but their employers are bringing people in from Mexico to do roofing, to do framing, to do the actual foundations of homes. So because they can't find enough talent in Canada to be able to perform those jobs.
Perfect. I really like the example that you gave, Alex, because it just helps to understand what an LMIA is and how the process happens. Thank you so much for that.
Stacey, I would like to, just to join you in on Alex's point of view. For the ICTs, we handle a lot of ICTs, intra-company transfers for multinational corporations such as Accenture, Cognizant, Wipro, Tata Global, Tata Consulting, TCS. So we do a lot of these ICTs for them. And as Alex said, these are IT professionals who are, and these corporations, these multinational corporations are the IT powerhouses behind are usually all the big name banks and all the big name companies over here. So we do help all these people first of all come on a ICT work permit, and their families on a work permit and children on study permit. And secondly, what happens is once they have done the time here, spent 1 year here, we help them move on to permanent residence and how to go forward.
Okay, perfect. So that is how the entire process happens. So someone could just come with an ICT work permit, be eligible for a permanent residence, which is actually very good.
Excellent. It's an excellent opportunity for people who are skilled, talented, and this is a pathway without the student pathway. They don't need to come as a student, and they just come as on their own skill set for their employers.
Very true, very true. Thank you for explaining that so well. Now, moving into another direction is about refugee status. So, Nabeel, would the work permit process be different for a refugee, or is it the same as all other individuals applying for a work permit?
Refugees are so what happens with refugees is that once an applicant who enters Canada, let's say as a visitor, and they make a claim for a refugee asylum, for an asylum claim for a refugee, the government of Canada, while their claim is being processed by the Immigration and Refugee Board (IRB), the immigration of the IRCC allows them to apply for a work permit. So they apply for a work permit, and their work permit is usually valid for 2 years at a time, and it's an open work permit. So if their case is not heard within the 2 years time period, they will get another 2 years work permit again, but they have to apply and they have to wait for the case hearing. So if their case is approved, then what happens is they are unable, they can go on to become permanent residents. If their case is refused, then there are other streams that they have to go forward then. They have to look for the stream sense, but the refugee work permit is an open work permit, and that needs to be applied.
Okay, it's very good that you've also mentioned that it's an open work permit so that our audience know exactly the kind of work permit. To all our viewers, I hope that you all have got a better gist of what an open work permit is compared to a closed work permit. Now, Alex, before we move into asking you all some more questions from our viewers, would you like to add anything else that I may have missed about work permits that would be essential for our viewers to know?
I trying to think of something that we could have missed, but we covered, I would say, over 90% of every case. I did have something top of head, but I think we did cover a good part of the conditions for work permits. And most of the clients that we are seeing are, as Nabeel said, are coming in through intercompany transfers. There are many students here that invested lots of money in their education, and they have gone through the postgraduate work permit. They're usually getting 3 years of a postgraduate work permit. What's really critical is that you do find a job that is in the national occupation classification of a 0A or B. You can look this up in the matrix through the Service Canada website, StatsCan, and to make sure that the job description that you're actually doing is classified in those categories. Because if you're doing something in a category of C or D, which is, it could be a painter's job, or it could be a low-skilled job, a cashier. Some of these positions in the past were not qualified to enter into the express entry pool. With this new policy that has been issued, it does give some individuals the opportunity to bypass that regulation and actually qualify for permanent residence, because the government has recognized that all these talents are important to the growing economy of Canada. As much as you hire a white collar worker, you also need blue collar workers. And that's what the government has recognized, and they're moving in the right direction for these occupations.
True. Thank you so much, Alex. Nabeel, is there
Excuse me,
anything
Stacey.
that you would like? Yes.
Yes, I would like to add. I think we we have to talk about one topic is the work permits through the provincial nominee programs.
Exactly.
So yes, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. That was what was top of my mind, but it just didn't come to me immediately.
Yes. Yes, so the through the provincial nominee programs, how it works is that an individual, first of all, usually most how the provincial nominee programs are being gated forward or are going forward. The programs are usually being employer driven. So usually, I mean, most of these provincial nominee programs have the requirement of an employer, and that to a qualified employer. It cannot be just anybody, especially in provinces like Ontario and BC, which are the largest provinces in Canada. They have their own requirements, specific requirements. So they have to be the employer has to be qualified, and there has to be a position that has to be advertised, and then the employer has to apply to the province to obtain something known as PNC, that is provincial nominee certificate. So once a provincial nominee certificate is issued to the employer for the temporary foreign worker, then there are two actions that the temporary foreign worker can take. Number one is apply for the PR application, and number two is apply for the work permit application. So the work permit applied for the principal applicant on this provincial nominee would be a closed work permit, because it is it is based on the employer specific. And secondly, but their family members, their spouse can apply for an open work permit, and the children can apply for a study permit. Which is again study permits also open. So this is how, and in the meanwhile, once their work permits are processed, they come to Canada, they start working here with the employer, and their PR file is in process, which takes about 1 to 2 years for the PR to be approved. And in the meanwhile, they continue to work in Canada and contribute to the economy and fulfill the employer's requirements to for the skill set. So this is how usually the provincial nominee work permits work.
And does this have anything to do with the scores, the CRS, or do these applicants have a higher score? Is there anything with regards to that?
There are certain streams. Again, each province has their own streams. There are certain streams which are related to express entry. And if your stream, you qualify under that stream, you get additional 600 points under the express entry CRS. So let's say you were earlier at 300 points. So with the 600 points, you go to 900 points. But again, there are different streams. Each province has multiple streams. So each province has their own provincial setup, provincial immigration setup. Each province has their own immigration department. So this is how it works out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nabeel. Thank you for actually bringing the topic up so that we could discuss it.
Yes, thank you. No problem.
Stacey, I may want to add
to
Nabeel's comment that the provincial nomination programs have quotas. So it's not that it's open all year round. They open and close these programs based on a certain expression of interest, the applicants being employers, and they have a certain quota limit for the job-driven streams that are sponsored through employers. So obviously this limits the number of applicants that can be processed through the provincial nomination. I know that in our firm, we did a number of these applicants and they were very successful. And we've seen some of the individuals who were sponsored from outside Canada have come here as workers on a closed work permit and are currently working and will be eligible, and their applications for permanent residence has been filed at the same time. So within a year, these individuals will be able to claim permanent residency in Canada.
Perfect. That is actually very good to know. Thank you so much for your points about this topic, both Alex and Nabeel. Now, before we end today's session, as promised, we will be having a Q&A session where we will be picking out about 3 to 4 questions from our viewers. So allow me to just check some of the questions that we got. Okay, the first question, Nabeel, the question is, I am a PR in Canada and I've got a job offer to work in the US. What are some of the conditions that I must follow in order to maintain my permanent residency?
Yes, that's a very good question. Because as we talk right now, just before my before this webinar started, I got a few calls because just now today the government of Canada has banned flights from India and Pakistan for 30 daes. So a lot of people who are planning to come in to fulfill their number of days for PR, and they are now all kind of, their plans have gone topsy turvy. So what happens is, to maintain your permanent residence status in Canada, you need to be present in Canada 730 days out of 5 years. So 730 days means 2 years out of 5 years. This is only for to maintain your permanent residency status, not for citizenship.
Okay.
So you maintain your permanent residency status if you have completed 730 days in the last 5 years. If you don't meet that requirement, your PR card will not be renewed and you will lose your PR status. So this is to be noted. So anybody going to US as a PR, first of all, we recommend that you become a citizen and then go to US, so that you don't have to fulfill the number of days requirement. Or secondly, they have the option that they have to make sure that they are 730 days present in Canada. Or there's a third way out, that if this person's spouse is already a Canadian citizen, so they can, if the Canadian citizen can go to US with them, and this person lives with them in US, so they will be counted as they're living in Canada for the renewal of PR. So that is one option possible. And the other options are that if this person is being offered a job through a Canadian corporation, Canadian Crown Corporation. So if he's going to US as a Canadian Crown employee, that is the employee for, let's say, for CBSA or IRCC or any other department. So this is how their stay in US will be counted towards their PR renewal. Otherwise, it is not possible then.
Okay.
Nabeel, Nabeel, I also want to add that you were on the right track. There are obviously crown corporations who allocate you outside of Canada. You would never lose your status as a PR. In addition to that, you may have Canadian corporations that have branches in the US, and they give you a job offer for a very specific period of time of 1 or 2 years with a justifiable letter that you are an expert in that field and you would definitely serve the company in its duties, that the Canadian corporation would help maintain your PR status. You would not lose any days from actually working overseas. So that is a major advantage if you are offered a job and you're offered a job with a Canadian corporation that has locations outside of Canada, is definitely take advantage of it. But if you get a job offer from a corporation that is only US based and you take that position, you must return to Canada periodically to make sure that you meet the requirements of your PR. And sometimes, because of the workload requirements and your hours that you have to keep, it would be very difficult for you to maintain your PR requirements in the future. So you have to seriously consider what you stand to lose if you take a job overseas.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nabeel and Alex. So would you like to add something
that
more?
is very correct, Alex. I mean, but on the other hand, we also have in the past we have done some cases for PR renewals where the employees were working for a Canadian multinational in other parts of the world other than US as well. But that was again a Canadian multinational corporation, which was involved in projects outside in other countries as well, in Middle East and Southeast Asia, other countries. So there were those individuals again were very at a certain level with multinational corporations.
A good example of that is a Canadian corporation in civil engineering, people who build bridges, build rail trains, transportation, roads. If they hire you as an engineer and you have permanent residency, these jobs, you will not lose any credits towards your permanent residency because they're hiring you under the Canadian entity, which allows you to transfer and keep your status as a permanent resident.
Yes, that is true. I mean, Alex, if you like, I mean, we can give the example of SNC Lavalin.
Yes,
right?
exactly. It's good example.
Yes, yes. SNC Lavalin has projects all over the world, and in Europe, in Asia, I mean, Middle East, they have projects everywhere, and their employees are civil engineers, electrical engineers, nuclear power engineers. They are posted throughout the world on specific projects, which lead to, and that can be taken as a specific, I mean, case for PR renewal outside Canada. Then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nabeel and Alex, for answering that question. I hope our viewer who left this question actually got the answer. Moving on, Alex, this question is about a US citizen who would like to work in Canada. So they're asking us what would be better. Would it be better for them to apply for PR from US, or would it be better to apply for a work permit? I guess what they're trying to ask is what would be faster for them to come to Canada and work. What do you suggest?
A job offer is always your first step to entry into Canada. The same goes with Canadians, excuse me, who want to work in the US. A job offer is the first step. After the job offer comes the natural pathway of applying for your permanent residency. Usually, the permanent residency straight off as an initial step is very difficult because the requirements to qualify through the express entry are relatively high, or at least in the past, they were relatively high. If the score for the comprehensive ranking score continues to be depressed, an example is the score on the last draw, but this was for Canadian experience class, was only 417. When the government submits or declares a score for foreign skilled workers, usually the scores are much higher. So my first reaction is get a job offer, and from that job offer, when you're in Canada, it's much easier to apply for permanent residency.
Thank you, Alex. I think that was really good advice. Thank you so much for that. Now, we do have a lot of questions about the recent pathway program that just came out. So I've just picked two questions which would actually cover the rest of the questions. So Nabeel, this is for you. So this is about the recent graduate pathway. Does the applicant require to have a job, or just a work permit is enough? And if they do require a job, is it supposed to be a full-time job, or even a part-time job would be enough?
So under the new public policy, there are three different streams that the government has introduced. But the stream with the major cap of 40,000 is for international students with recent credentials. So as long as an international student has qualified, has completed their study, and they are on a work permit, job is not mandatory. As of now, this is the public policy. They say you must be authorized to work in Canada. That means you must have a valid work permit. And they have not mentioned that whether you need an NOCB level job or not, as long as you're a recent student, and if you have completed at least 2 years of study in Canada. So 2 years of study in Canada for any other trade, and any duration, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, any duration for certain skilled trades, which includes laborers, which include construction laborers, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, roofers, So those are all for those trades. People working those trades doesn't require any limited any education limitation, 1 year or 2 year. It could be 1 year, 2 years. But other than those working in any other trades, they require a minimum 2-year diploma or certificate to apply for here. So that means they don't need a job as of now. But they should have a work permit, and they should be obviously having a postgraduate work permit means that they have completed their studies successfully. Then you're muted, Sissy.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you so much for answering that question. Actually, the next question was about being temporarily laid off. So since you mentioned that it's not mandatory to have a job, it would be okay for these students to also apply. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. As long as they have a valid work permit, it's fine. No problem.
Okay, perfect. Let me see if I have a few more questions and all right. And to all our viewers, thank you for sending in your questions. Of course, some of you all have left some details in the chat. But as Mr. Nabeel has also mentioned, that we would still need some more information from you to assess whether you would actually be eligible for, say, a work permit, LMIA, or PR for that fact. So we have also left our numbers in the chat. If you cannot give us a call, you can always send us a message on WhatsApp. There are 2 numbers mentioned, so feel free to reach out to us on these numbers, and we will be happy to assist you and contact you and connect you with one of our consultants.
Stacey, I would just like to add that we have, with time, over the period of time, we have opportunities where we link foreign workers with employment opportunities in Canada. These opportunities could be in the construction industry, could be in other industries as well, which include IT, retail, and other industry. So as long as if somebody is interested, they can always free to connect with us, give us their experience, their education, and always ensure that it's always better that if they have an IELTS score, the English language score, so that to back up their credentials, so that once we are presenting their skill set to the employers in Canada, we can tell them that this person has so and so in English language score, and this is their proficiency in the English language. Because in some trades you don't need a very high level of English, but obviously you need a basic English requirement to qualify to work in Canada then.
Perfect. Thank you, Nabeel. Is there anything else that you would like to add just to conclude today's webinar?
I think Alex would like to add something there. Right, Alex?
I just want to thank all the participants, the attendees that have participated in this. I know we may have not been able to get to all your questions, but I do encourage you to get in touch with us more personally so we can spend a little bit more time gathering some information from you and to help advise you further as to how you can go through the pathway to permanent residency. Again, thank you for attending, and stay tuned for our next webinar.
Thank you so much.
Yes, next webinar, as Alex said earlier, we are going to hopefully do towards May 6th, closer to May 6th, once we have more details on the public policy and how to go forward with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both Alex and Nabeel, for taking time to do this webinar. A big thank you to all our viewers who stayed up. I understand that a lot of you all are from different countries and the time zones are different. Thank you so much for attending our webinar and sending in your questions. We shall let you all know about the next webinar. Till then, I would like to sign off and say, have a good evening. Bye-bye.